Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the FME World Fair. If this is the first World Fair event that you've attended so far, a few of you have already said that you've been to a couple, but if this is your first, thanks for coming along. If you've joined a few since last Tuesday, you might have been building up your reputation points on the platform. There are some prizes to win. Hopefully you've had a bit of a go in the escape room, that kind of thing, so there's lots been going on. Hopefully our session is going to help you to progress a little bit further with your learning journey, especially given the topics that we've got lined up for you today. So the session today is called Circus Tricks Juggling Your Data Challenges, because the focus of this event is to hopefully give you a few new special skills through a little bit of free training, essentially. We're going to dig into 3 detailed topics and review some of the new features of FME 2021. We're going to try and demystify webhooks for you, and we're going to have a masterclass in Regex as well. At the end of the event, we hope you'll leave with a few new tricks up your sleeve to be able to dazzle your friends and colleagues. Well, perhaps maybe not your friends, but you never know. Your colleagues may become friends when you've shown them what you've discovered today. So thank you for registering and joining us live. It really means a lot to us that you've joined us today. And I'd like to introduce you to the One Spatial Pavilion team who are here to help you. Hayley has been responsible for putting the event together. She'll be helping support the technology, allowing us to successfully broadcast this session. I'll be your host. I'm the FME Division Manager, and you can throw techie or sales questions directly at me. Please post any questions that you've got for Simon or Mary to me as well, so that I can ask them on your behalf at the end of each session. Charlie's our client advisor. She's on the Q&A and will be responding to any of your commercial or license-based inquiries, so you're welcome to throw those out directly to her. Mary and Simon, they're our principal consultants that you'll hear from both of them today. There's going to be a bunch of us around, so some of the other certified professionals from our FME division will be fielding any technical questions that you might have live today as well. You might see Ian Fletcher and also Mark McLean, as well as Simon, Mary and myself in the chat window. So hopefully between the 5 of us, you've should be able to handle any questions that you might throw into the chat window. Any One Spatial staffers will be easily identified because after our names in the Zoom window, you'll see that we've added One Spatial in brackets, so you can easily spot us. So that's who to send messages to if you're not sending them out publicly. Now you'll no doubt have some questions, as I say, during the session. Joining this event live, part of the beauty of that is that you can post questions throughout the sessions. The Zoom interface has got that chat option that you've had a little try with already this morning. You can direct messages, or you can send a chat out to everybody. You can also actually go over to our pavilion. That's in the hub platform where you registered for this event in the first place. There is, if you go into the main pavilion view, you can see that you can go and pick the One Spatial Pavilion and go in and leave a chat message there as well if you wish. Feel free to send any type of question to us. We're going to do our best to answer them today between the sessions. But if we miss you, we're going to gather a transcript of the Q&A at the end of the event and make sure that everybody who posted a question gets a response. Also, during the sessions, we're happy to receive questions that you might want to direct at the speakers. I'm going to be asking those in slots at the end of the sessions. So send your questions, but prefix the questions with the speaker name. If there's any confusion over, who that might be directed at, that would be really helpful to me. As far as sound and video during the session is concerned, we've just done a mute all. That means that you've had your audio taken away from you, but don't be offended. It's not a problem at your end. We just want to cut down on a little bit of the feedback. So it's not going to stop you from unmuting yourself again, though. So if anyone wants to come on mic at the end of a session to actually ask a question in person, you're more than welcome to. There's going to be an obvious slide appear to give you that cue. We just ask that you wait to ask questions till the end of each slot. If you want to turn your camera on too to ask a question, you're absolutely welcome. We'll be unmuting the different sort of main speakers during the session. So we are also going to be cutting between live broadcast and pre-record sessions. We've pre-recorded the main sessions to try to limit the chance of technical problems where possible with this kind of broadcast, but as we're going to be shuffling between live and pre-record, those are going to be perfect slots for you to fire any questions at us if you wish. Who are One Spatial? If you've just landed in our World Fair pavilion, then you know there's a chance you might not have heard of us before. All you need to know in the context of today is that we are data specialists who care about data quality. And for the last 50 years, we've worked with lots of customers around the world with their data and our technology. We also partner with some of the best third-party vendors in the market to ensure that our customers' solutions include the best of breed kit. Those of you joining live today no doubt managed to find your way via the World Fair platform. And we've got 6 slots at this global event altogether, all running in the English language. That's not true of all of the events globally. There are some in different regional languages as well. And we've offered 2 different time zones from our side of things. So GMT, we did an event last week, which if you missed it, we've got a recording that will be up on our on-demand site soon. And then we've also done 4 events in Australian Eastern Standard Time for our Australian cousins. Today our UK focus is on new features and also some technical skills, whereas last week we did a customer showcase. So on to the agenda for today. First up, it'll be myself talking you through some of the features that we think are worthy of more than just a footnote. I'm going to dig into a little bit of the detail of the latest release so you can go and try out the new features with a little bit more confidence. Then we're going to switch gears, and it's down to you all to try to work out if Simon came up with the title for the session before the detail, or if he had to retrofit a title onto his presentation once it was completed. Either way, between now and his session, your challenge is to try to work out what musical artist from the late 80s he could possibly be making reference to. During the session, though, he'll aim to improve your knowledge as regards to what a webhook is and how you might find a use for interacting with what day to day. And then to conclude the barrage of knowledge and circus tricks will be Mary O'Brien. She's going to offer a masterclass in regular expressions to get your pattern matching skills up to scratch. What's Regex and why do you need it is the aim of her game. So sit back and strap in for the first part of this roller coaster. I'm going to launch the first pre-recorded session, and this is where I'm going to hand over to live from live me to the pre-recorded me. So we're going to switch gears and please enjoy. Welcome to our session focusing on the newest release of FME 2021, and just a few of the new features that we feel worthy of a little extra coverage so you can see how they might help you. My name's David Eagle and I'm the One Spatial FME Division Manager, and as it's the annual FME Shindig, it would be very remiss of us if we didn't spend at least a few short moments on what's great about the latest version of FME Desktop to hit the shelves. FME 2021 is here, and if you're on a current annual maintenance and support package or an active FME subscription, you can fill your boots with the latest and greatest FME Desktop version. The links here give you access to both sets of installers for FME Desktop and FME Server, or you can just raise a support case with our team and we'll help get you upgraded. There's also a link here for the What's New article that covers a few of the main features of the release, but this session is designed to dig a bit deeper and eke out a detail or two that didn't appear in the headlines or that flew under the radar completely. So the first thing to mention is that when you do get to download FME 2021 in preparation to install it, the install experience will be subtly different to the one you've experienced in the past. Firstly, the file the majority of you will download at least will be the Windows installer, and it's now an executable file rather than the traditional MSI file or Microsoft installer. The changes happen partly for efficiency and partly because the installer has outgrown the old approach. What this means in practice is that the first step you'll need to complete is locating somewhere to unpack the executable to. However, once unpacked, the installer has been streamlined because just like with FME Server, we've now got an express install mode that lays down FME Desktop with some common default settings. Meaning after the unpack, if you want to, you can complete an FME Desktop install in 4 clicks. And once you've got FME installed, you'll likely want to go and get your standard FME packages installed. Now, if you're not familiar with packages, you'll want to get acquainted because they're a way in which SAFE provision support for certain services through FME. Things that are external to FME but have the propensity to change more frequently than we might like. Things that might have a couple of years ago forced you to have to reinstall FME, but now packages often negate the need for a full reinstall in favour of a simple update of just the package alone. Services like connectivity to SharePoint, ArcGIS Online or Amazon's S3 file storage are examples of connectivity managed via a package. Anyway, if you'd like to find out more about packages, I'll refer you back to the recording of the 5 Hot Features webinar from this time last year when we covered it in much more depth. That session's available on our on-demand pages at the URL on the right there. So that's bit.ly/5hotfme 2020. Anyway, the reason to highlight packages again in this session is partly because they're such an important feature of FME Desktop these days, and partly because we've now got an extra way of managing them in the case of a new button in FME 2021 to check for updates, which forces a manual check to see if any packages you rely on need an upgrade. That said, there's also a little trick I wanted to share with you that helps you find out when and what has changed in a package. Some of you may be aware that packages are also available on the SAFE Hub, so that's at hub.safe.com. It's effectively the App Store for FME. Well, if you find the one you're interested in on the Hub, log in and then star the package. That will register your interest with that package via your SAFE account, and as a result, if anything changes with the package, you'll get an email notification to let you know about it. That can be a really important tidbit of information, especially if, say, the authentication approach for one of your production data providers has changed, meaning that getting this notification will allow you to hopefully react in time. Now, many of you are well aware that adding new format support to FME is generally a mainstay of the new release at this time of year. And what I wanted to draw your attention to is an OGC standard that has just been added. It's the Open Geospatial Consortium's Web Map Tile Service Format, or WMTS. And as of FME 2021, it's now got direct read support, and you can consume it in a couple of key ways that I'll show you through a quick demo. The first thing I'm going to do is just read a CSV of track details, captured by a GPS device on a walk. And I'm going to read that in cache mode so we can briefly inspect the data. Here you can see a few IDs that I've plotted on the map using the X and Y coordinates in the source CSV file. But what I'd like to do now is add a new reader to the Workbench canvas to read in some data for context from a web map tile service. And for the sake of the demo, I've added the tile service I'm using as a preset to save me having to fill in all the details each time I want to use it. Typically what we have to define is the URL for the get capabilities statement along with any necessary credentials or token we need to authenticate against the service. Then once correctly entered, we'll get back a list of layers that are available to us. Here we're getting back some colour OS raster data. But that's not the only way that FME can consume the data, because it's also possible to set up a web map tile service or perhaps one of the other OGC standards like WMS or WFS as one or more of your background maps in the data inspector. The benefit of this is that your background map is then in the native projection that much of your own data will be in, and as a result the inspector doesn't need to do any on-the-fly reprojection that it might need to do if you were using, say, the free Stamen Maps representation of OpenStreetMap. In this example here, we're just adding the same walking data to the inspector and then toggling on the OS 1 to 50,000 colour raster data and swapping it out for the 25K equivalent for a bit more detail. You can also adjust the opacity for that bit more focus on your own data. To be able to demonstrate consuming a web map tile service, some of you may have noticed that we've kindly been given access to Europa Technologies via Europa service for the demo. You can find out more about their service at the links provided on this slide. The feature I want to highlight is new for FME 2021. It's the data-aware transformers feature. It's officially now out of tech preview, and it's also made its way into a few more locations. What is it? Well, when data is cached via run with feature caching mode, the attribute values that actually populate your data can now be retrieved from within specific transformers. Those listed here, but basically any transformer that incorporates the ability to use a test clause. So that of course includes the two tester transformers and functionalities such as conditional statements in transformers like the attribute manager. Retrieval of these values will prevent any data integrity issues that occur with spelling mistakes that might happen due to manual keying errors, for example. Or more importantly, you can speed up building tests into your workspace as it's one less thing you have to inspect in advance of authoring the process. This feature partly entered FME in the 2020.1 build of FME, but it's formalised in FME 2021. And once you've added your reader, the key element required is that the feature exists to be used in conjunction with cache mode. So running the workspace with feature caching enabled is the key to success. And again, the best way to understand how this capability works is for me to demonstrate it. What I've got here is a workspace that consumes a spreadsheet of Scottish Munros, and utilising a few transformers, including one downloaded from the hub, it cleans up the coordinates so that they can be plotted in the right place in Scotland. However, the purpose of the exercise is to allow the filtering and identification of how many Munros are in which part of Scotland. The tester here, for example, is one of the newly data-aware transformers. You can see it has a test clause that allows us to identify any Munros in Aberdeenshire. But if we click through to the cached values, the transformer also really helpfully reports to us all of the other unique values that are recorded as potential authority names in the dataset. This means that it isn't necessary to have to know the dataset in advance or have to do lots of reviews of the content. For now, I can just switch my interest to another area like Angus or Moray and rerun the workspace to get a different result. The test filter works in much the same way, although of course I have scope to include multiple test clauses in one place, with each test clause becoming an output port. Here, building up the required test clauses is quick, since we've been given the ability to copy and paste parameters, but even quicker now that we can just select cached attribute values too. Now with multiple output ports in the test filter, I can inspect data from each output port to review which part of Scotland gives me the densest concentration of Munros to bag. Here you can see I can just rerun the process and then inspect each port from the test filter to review the different parts of Scotland. Now the next hot feature that I wanted to showcase is one I've personally been waiting for a very long time. And I know I'm not the only one. It's an interface for constructing a form-based front end to a workspace, and it's called Manage User Parameters. It's a capability that's going to allow you to build neater and more logical forms as front ends to your workspaces, and as a knock-on impact, more resilient front ends to your FME server services and apps. Again, it's much simpler to just show you this one. In this example, I have a live feed of car parking space availability data across Bradford Town Centre. What I want to be able to do is configure the workspace to work differently each time I run it, because it produces for me an HTML-based report providing a status of each car park. Sometimes when I run it, I want to be able to query the availability at the leisure exchange and include a map with the result, and sometimes I'm more interested in the detail for the Crown Court, but without the map. Parameters are the way to help with this flexibility, and the new Manage User Parameters dialog box is the feature that's been designed new for FME 2021 to make building interesting forms more manageable. In this example, my input and output datasets location will never change, so those parameters can be removed. But having a group box to make the dialog box look easier to navigate is more helpful, and within that area of the form is where I'll build in my choices for the user to select. The choices in this case can be mandatory or optional, and you can preview your progress along the way. There've always been assorted parameter types to select from, like date and color pickers, or password and file path selections, but this new interface also allows you to start to control which parameters are shown by default, and we're expecting an extra addition to this interface very soon that will allow parameters to have relationships with each other. This has been on a lot of users' wish lists for some time. Once you've built your form though, with the parameters you need, they aren't much use unless you can actually embed them into the tests nested within your workspace. In the process we've got here, the key thing is to ensure that the Bradford CP parameter gets tested to allow the user the ability to select the car part that they're interested in. And the test filter is used to allow the process to route the data in a different direction through the workspace depending on whether the user wants a map to be included or not. When the process is run using the prompt and run functionality then, the form pops up and the user can select their choices, which will ultimately determine how the workspace runs. And that's shown here. In this example, we've queried the leisure exchange and we can see that we're generating a map through the HTML report generator. This time round, a different car park with no map. Go and give it a try. I guarantee it's one of those features you'll suddenly wonder how you used FME without it. And finally, for our fifth hot feature of today's session, we have the HTTP caller. Now for veterans of FME, you'll already know the HTTP caller is not new. So you might wonder why I'm bringing it up here. Well, first of all, for those of you that don't know, these days when I'm asked what my favourite transformer is, which is more often than you might think, the answer is almost always the HTTP caller. It certainly used to be the workspace runner, and that opinion was corroborated last week a couple of times when it got some honorary mentions in presentations at our Customer Stories World Fair event. But since data much more commonly resides at the end of a REST endpoint these days, and the HTTP caller allows me to get it, it tends to top the list. And if you're not familiar with what an API is, stick around as Simon will touch on them shortly in his session about webhooks. So, if it's not new, why did it get the "and finally" slot at today's event? Well, it got a superpower, and that superpower is concurrency, the ability to submit more than one request at the same time, and boy does it make a difference to performance. To demonstrate this capability, I need to do little more than a head-to-head. What we have here are two workspaces. The one on the left, open in FME 2020, and the one on the right, open in FME 2021. Both workspaces are identical, but the HTTP caller on the left is the old one, and the one on the right got the new special superpower. In this case, I'm sticking with the new default, which allows me to submit 25 requests at a time. In this case, those requests are going direct to the postcode.io API that allows me to get more details about an address that I have stored in a spreadsheet. In this example, for speed, I'm just processing 288 records, and you can see the difference is quite stark. 3.5 seconds on the right versus 15 seconds with the old HTTP caller. And if you scale that up in this example to 11,000 records, the new version does the job in 26 seconds versus 5.5 minutes with the old transformer. So as far as I'm concerned, this largely hidden away feature is really the star of the show. So there we go. Every year, FME evolves to allow it to stay relevant against the backdrop of our ever quickly racing along IT sector. And hopefully that session gave you a quick whistle-stop tour of some of the new features in FME Desktop. That should help to increase your productivity over the coming weeks. Thanks a lot. Okay, so hopefully that was useful. I've got a couple of questions that have been sent to me during that session. The first one was something about parameters. You mentioned something about parameters having relationships with each other in the future. Can you explain what that meant? So we've been talking to Safe about the parameter wizard that they've created, and it's cropped up a couple of times in recent discussions that this is sort of phase one of their work, and something that has been asked for quite a bit in the past is if you have and define a user parameter in the prompt and run dialog, is it possible to set it up so that when you choose an option or when you select something in that parameter, it ungrays out or makes another parameter visible? A classic example is maybe a parameter that says, would you like to clip the data? And if you choose yes instead of no, it then makes a parameter available that allows you to select the path to the clipping geometry you want to use, for example. Whereas if you don't want to do any clipping, you don't need to see that parameter. So that's what I was alluding to. There was a rumor that we might see something along those lines in the .1 release of 2021. .1. So that'll be around the summer, sort of June, July time. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed for that, because I think that will add a lot more value to this general interface. I got another one that was about that HTTP caller concurrency. Have you tried making more than the default number of concurrent HTTP requests? So the default was 25. You saw me change the slider a little bit. The answer is yes, I have tried. And I actually only tried it on a couple of different APIs. And it was interesting. Safe have clearly picked 25 for a reason. Actually, the couple that I tried, I didn't see a great deal more performance benefit over 25 concurrent requests with the two APIs I was testing with. I mean, you can probably tell that obviously, actually physically making the request is a bit of effort in itself. So if you do lots of them, it sort of depends on how well that API works. The other thing you've got to be very careful of now is it is much more easy to get locked out of an API if you make too many requests. You may have thresholds, you may have volume per second limits on the API, so just be mindful of that with that HTTP caller. In order to get that new transformer, you need to take the workspace that you're working in, open it up in FME 2021, and you can either right-click on your existing HTTP caller and upgrade it, or just go and add a new one, and you'll see that it's a new version. I think it's version 3 that you'll see. Do we know if those parameter changes will also be available in FME Server 2021? Also, is the tree structure of parameter values fixed in Server 2021? I don't know the answer to the second part of the question. I'll need to check on that. I'm not actually familiar with that tree structure issue, but I'll go and follow that up for you, Martin. Do we know if those parameter changes will also be available in? Yeah, I mean, basically they should be. Certainly around the parameters, the workspace in desktop is effectively where you define the parameters that ultimately then surface in things like your prompt and run parameter, or ultimately on your server form. So yes, it should be linked to that parameter wizard in server. So okay, I'm going to wind up the Q&A there on that session, if that's okay. If anyone's got any more questions about that session, by all means throw them into the chat. We can still pick them up later on. But for now, I'm going to nudge through to Simon's session on webhooks. So over to Simon in the pre-recorded state, but we'll see him on camera afterwards for the questions.
Good morning. Ever hung out with the cool IT kids and been forced to nod when they started talking about webhooks, although secretly thinking, what in the heck is a webhook? Or maybe you understand the concept but don't know what you might do with a webhook practically. Hi, my name is Simon Green and I'm a Principal Consultant in the FME Division at One Spatial. In this session, I'll take you through the detail of webhooks and show you them in context, and who knows, at the end, you'll perhaps be able to send notifications when a data processing task is completed to Microsoft Teams. All right, so let's stop, collaborate, and listen. On this roller coaster ride of a presentation, we'll start off by taking a look at the theory behind webhooks. This will be followed by a couple of demos, one using FME Server to receive a webhook, the other where FME Desktop sends data to a webhook. A brief look at applications that have webhook support, and then finish up with a summary. Without further ado, grab your vanilla ice cream and let's check out the hook. So, roll up your sleeves, run on the spot, do a competitive grunt, and take a step back and eye up the challenge. We're going to help you flex your technical muscles and learn how to get the most out of interacting with webhooks in FME in this short, focused training session. A webhook is a method for an application to communicate with another automatically. The concept is similar to that of an SMS notification. Imagine going on holiday abroad. I know, right? And because it's been so long since your last one, you forgot to tell your bank you're going away. You take a trip to a nice expensive restaurant as a treat to celebrate your newfound freedom. You've had a delicious but suspiciously small portion meal. However, when it comes to pay the eye-watering bill, your payment is declined. You immediately get a text message from your bank alerting you to a potential fraudulent activity on your account. So you notify the bank that it was actually you and payment goes through. So what happened here? Well, an event occurred that triggered a message to be sent to your phone number for you to then action. And it is that event that is similar in concept to a webhook. A similar example demonstrating a webhook could be played out as follows. An event in an application occurs, a change to a feature in ArcGIS Online, for example, that triggers change data to be sent in near real time to a unique webhook URL, the web equivalent of a phone number, if you like, set up in FME Server. This data payload is then processed by FME Server, which inserts the change data into the destination dataset, perhaps a new row in Google Sheets. In fact, it is this example that I shall demonstrate shortly. A webhook is not to be confused with an API. Although similar in nature, they are fundamentally different in the way they deliver data. APIs poll for data, webhooks push data automatically. Remember the good old days when you had to check your email to see if you had any new messages? Now emails are simply pushed to you. That analogy is a bit like the way to describe the difference between an API and a webhook. Webhooks therefore allow an application to react to real-time event-driven data. Typically, the payload sent to a webhook URL of a receiving application is JSON, but it could equally be XML. So, if data is being pushed to us, that makes it less resource intensive than an API, where we are constantly asking it for any new data. Depending on what applications you are configuring webhooks on and where they are located, will depend on whether FME Server needs a public DNS record, i.e. an address on the public internet. For the first demo that I will show you, I'm using an FME Cloud instance that, by its very nature, has a public DNS record. Without it, this demo simply wouldn't work. If the application you are configuring webhooks on resides in the same domain as FME Server, then no public DNS record is required. The first demo then is going to show you how FME Server can receive a webhook from an application, ArcGIS Online in our case, process the data payload, and then update data in another application, Google Sheets. Right, let's demo FME Server receiving a webhook. Let's take a look at our hosted feature service in ArcGIS Online. As you can see, we have a fairgrounds layer visible in the map viewer. We can see a number of fairs, represented by the big wheel symbol, have popped up in central London. What I want to do is edit some of the details of one of these fairground features. Zipsters have increased the number of rides on offer, so I need to go and update that. But before I do, let's take a quick look at the Google Sheet that will get updated automatically once the update has been made in ArcGIS Online. This Google Sheet document is made up of two tabs, the changelog and the summary. Our changes in ArcGIS Online are inserted as individual rows into the changelog. When a row is inserted, the summary tab is automatically updated too. So if we look at the summary sheet, we can see that there are currently 9 updates that have occurred. That will obviously change shortly, so keep that number in mind. Okay, let's go to ArcGIS Online and make that change. So I'm just going to increase the number of rides here to 14 and hit update, and that should make the change for us. Right, that's done. Let's go back to Google Sheets and see the donut chart update automatically. So, what just happened there? In simple terms, ArcGIS Online just sent a message to FME Server containing details of the change event. This is actually sent as a post request containing a JSON body to FME Server. Let's jump to FME Server now and see how that is handled. In FME Server, I have an automation set up with a webhook trigger waiting to receive change events from ArcGIS Online. This is the trigger. Let's have a look at the configuration. The webhook URL is created once the automation has been saved. It's this URL that is required for the webhook configuration of the hosted feature service in ArcGIS Online, the source application. When a change occurs to a feature in the fairgrounds layer in ArcGIS Online, a JSON message is sent to the webhook trigger. In this example, the whole JSON message is passed into the workspace using the message event key. This can be found under the output keys, event keys, message. We shall see how this is configured shortly. We can see the webhook trigger here is connected to this workspace action. It is configured to run the AGOL webhook workspace in the FME World Fair repository, and the message content is passed as a parameter into this workspace. This is the message event key mentioned a few moments ago. Let's look in the automation log to see this chain of events unfold. We can see the contents of the JSON event that triggers the workspace here, and that the workspace is submitted for translation. At the bottom of the log file, we can see that the workspace completes successfully. It's worth pointing out that if you are attempting to do this in FME Server 2020, it's important to note that this release encrypts the AGOL webhook, so this needs to be decoded in the workspace before you can work with the JSON payload. It might be interesting at this point to quickly take a look at the webhook in ArcGIS Enterprise. You'll need a little bit of back-end ArcGIS Enterprise configuration to set up the webhook, but once you've done that, it's relatively straightforward. This particular webhook has been set up to send features created features updated, and features deleted events to FME server. These can be seen as the change types here. You'll also see the hook URL. This is the address that the change event data gets sent to. This is the same URL that we saw in the automation webhook trigger a few moments ago. So, although we only demonstrated an update, the workflow can equally handle create and delete events too. There are some useful custom transformers on the FME Hub that can help you to work with the AGOL webhook data. Go to hub.safe.com. The last demo used FME Server to receive a webhook. The next example will be a lot more straightforward, as we shall be using FME Desktop to push data to a webhook in an application we have probably become all too familiar with over the last 18 months. Yep, Microsoft Teams. Instead of sending notifications to group email inboxes, where they probably get ignored anyway, at the end of this demo, you'll be one step away to finding another way to annoy your colleagues by subscribing them to a Teams channel that receives notifications from FME. Right, let's get started and build a quick workspace to do this. In this workspace, I've placed a creator onto the canvas and added several attributes that will provide the text in my Microsoft Teams message. To this, I will need to attach a decelerator. I'll set the delay to 5 seconds per feature. This will buy me some time to switch screens and for you to see the message appear in Teams. I'm just going to add some annotation here for best practice. I'll connect the decelerator to an HTTP caller. This is where the magic happens. This transformer uses the HTTP post request method to send the JSON message to the request URL, my Teams channel webhook URL. Let's configure it now. I paste in the URL to my Teams channel here. And I set the HTTP method to post. I now need to paste in the JSON that I want to be sent in the message body. So in the upload body, I open the text editor and paste in my JSON. So I can set that to syntax highlighting JSON so you can see that a little bit more clearly. The general structure of the JSON is quite straightforward, and you can see where I've referenced my feature attributes: title, subtitle, text, and URL. So those are the things that contain the message and the text that will appear in the notification. And finally, I need to set the content type to JSON. And then click OK. Again, I'm just going to add some annotation here. Again, for best practice, and save my workspace. Right, the workspace is ready. Let's test this out. I'm going to hit run on the workspace and then show you the Teams channel. So here's my pre-configured Teams channel called FME World Fair Webhook Demo. And there you have it. Another shameless piece of 90s nostalgia. Although this is a bit of a fun example, I hope this gets you thinking of new ways to send notifications. This of course is tailored to work with Teams, but there's no reason why it couldn't be adapted to work with Slack or other messaging platforms that support webhooks. Obviously, this session has just focused on ArcGIS Online and Microsoft Teams integration, but it doesn't need to stop there. There are many popular applications out there where webhooks can be configured to trigger a webhook in FME server. In fact, any application that has the ability to send information to a webhook can be used with FME server. Some of these popular applications are shown on screen. A third-party service such as Zapier, Automate.io, or If This Then That, can be also used to enhance the reach of FME with webhooks. One of these third-party apps, Zapier, aims to connect your apps and automate workflows. Sound familiar? I've used Zapier on and off for several years now and quite like the parallels with FME. The terminology is similar, with the concept of triggers and actions, and there's a real focus on creating code-free automations called Zaps. Also, with so many applications supported, now over 3,000, why not use Zapier to broaden the reach of FME server without having to figure out the API and webhook integrations for yourself? There is a 14-day free trial available, and once that runs out, a rather handy, if basic, free forever plan. So there we go. Hopefully you found that training topic useful, and the next time you find yourself pulling on a door and getting nowhere fast, try giving it a push and see if that helps. Today then, you've heard a little about the fundamental differences between how you can interact with an API and how that interaction differs with a webhook. You've also heard that because FME reacts to information that a webhook pushes to it, that can mean that your engine utilization can be much more efficient, because FME only has to do something, or react, when information is sent to it, rather than wasting time going checking for change and then doing nothing if there's been no change. So webhooks are efficient, almost always quick, and in the case of the Teams integration we saw, a neat way of bringing in wider members of your working team to collaborate on your projects. And finally, it's very common for radio stations to run misheard lyric competitions. So just to inform you, to close off his classic 1990 hit of Ice Ice Baby, Robert Van Winkle actually said, "If there's a problem, let FME solve it." He genuinely did. You just misheard. And so, just to finish, here are a few links that you might find useful. I'm quite happy to provide the JSON used in the FME desktop to Teams notification. Please feel free to get in touch. For those that might be interested, I also have a JSON template for a Teams message that would be suitable for use in an HTTP external action as a success failure notification when connected to the output ports of a workspace action in an automation. And finally, for a bit of fun, you should check out this Vanilla Ice reference in a webinar from SAFE last year. And that's a wrap. Thank you. Any questions?
There we go.
I can only apologise.
Yeah, you're getting quite a few heckles from internal staff, let alone. Right. So, please show the links again. So, yeah, we'll actually in the next section we'll actually throw the links directly into the chat window for you. So yeah, they'll come through to you direct. So. I've got a question for you from me rather than from anybody else, and it's purely and simply because a couple of weeks ago I noticed that SAFE put out a blog article and a new custom transformer called the Microsoft Teams Connector. Can you tell us what is the difference between your webhook approach and using that Teams connector transformer? It's a custom transformer that they've put up there.
Yeah. I mean, that was a nice surprise to see that on the FME Hub. So yeah, I was quite pleased to see that. So I guess firstly, possibly the most important difference is the configuration required to use the Teams connector. So you're probably likely going to need to involve your Azure administrator to in order to register that application with a Microsoft Identity platform. So, be prepared potentially for a sharp intake of breath at that point from an overly paranoid Azure administrator. I guess the beauty of my approach is that the configuration is basically just configuring an incoming webhook connector on a Teams channel. This shouldn't require any special admin permissions or IT involvement, particularly if you created that channel yourself and you're the channel owner, which is good. And again, the documentation is referenced in that presentation, and we'll share those links to take you through that process, which is pretty straightforward. And then once that's been created, then you just need to use an HTTP caller with a bit of formatted JSON to start posting messages. So in terms of differences in functionality between my approach and the Teams connector, then the Teams connector is obviously a little bit more functionality available. So you get to post a message in the Teams channel. You can list files that are associated to a channel and get SharePoint details for that channel as well. So that uses the Microsoft Graph API underneath. So there's quite a significant chunk of functionality on that transformer or connector. So it's probably worth the effort of going in and asking your Azure administrator to try and set that up, connection up for you. But I guess the only downside of that Teams connector is that it's only going to work with FME 2021 onwards.
Yeah, true.
So that won't work in older versions. So I guess, if you just want to post messages to a Teams channel to annoy people, then my approach is pretty simple and straightforward to do. And you can do that with an HTTP caller pretty much in any version of FME Desktop that you've got.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. And that transformer turned up as a custom transformer. There was quite a groundswell of demand for it, so I think it probably slipped through as a custom transformer initially, and might end up as a formal transformer at some point in the future. So I had a message, public DNS. You mentioned some workflows you might need a public DNS. What is it? What's one of those?
Yeah, I mean, you could probably have a whole webinar on DNS if you wanted to. I'm not going to do that. So a DNS is a domain name system, so it's a bit like the internet's version of the good old Yellow Pages. So probably showing my age a little bit there.
Yeah,
but,
with all your popular music references
yeah,
as well.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Guess what year and decade I was brought up in.
Yeah.
So yeah, you look up a business in the Yellow Pages to find a phone number so that you can contact them. The DNS is sort of the DNS sense. It's similar in that the phone number is the IP address of the the computer you're communicating with. So it's a way of locating and contacting a computer. So a DNS is basically a program that translates names or URLs into IP numbers and vice versa. So a DNS record is therefore a name and number entry in the DNS itself. And these can be public DNS or private. So for a server to be accessible on the public internet, then it needs to have a public DNS record and its IP address needs to be reachable on the internet.
Right.
In a nutshell.
In a nutshell. Fab. Okay. Thank you, mate. That is superb. And I'm going to step over to the next session now. So you're off the hook for the time being, and we're gonna look at Regex. So I'm gonna, before I start it this time, because whenever I click anywhere it stops the video playing, I'm going to stop my video and audio and then kick it in straight away.
Hello, my name is Mary O'Brien and I'm one of the consultants in the FME team here at OneSpatial, based in the UK. So this session is an introduction to regular expressions, and if you're not sure what it is I've just said actually, then this is the session for you. So I'm not a developer, but I stumbled across regex or regular expressions some years ago, and they've really been an invaluable part of my toolbox ever since. So today I'm looking to share with you a little of what I've learned about these extraordinary little tools. So here's the plan for today's session. We'll start with, well, what are regular expressions, why are they useful, and where can we find them in FME? And then we'll focus on some simple examples. So the plan really is to give you enough information in the next 15 minutes to hopefully get you hooked, and then point you to some resources where you can learn some more. So what is Regex? Well, here you go. It looks pretty crazy, right? And Regex, or regular expressions, are this little language that makes no sense at all at first glance. And I thought that was a really apt description, actually. But basically, Regex is all about pattern matching, so searching strings, so a lump of data, if you like, to try and find patterns that we're interested in. So, for example, the Regex here, FME, finds a match in the string we love, FME 2021. And Regex is pretty much the standard for string parsing, so it's a really useful tool to have in your toolkit. And it's used in a wide range of programming environments, so it's pretty powerful. And I should say here that there are many different flavors of Regex, depending on the environment, but the basics, the concepts and the basics, which is what we're looking at, are pretty standard across them all. So, let's not concern ourselves too much about that. And of course, we can use Regex in FME too. So why should I care? Why is it useful? Well, transformers that manipulate attributes, so strings of data, are consistently the most commonly used transformers in FME. And Regex gives us a way to further manipulate attributes. So it can be really useful for searching and validating data. For example, you might need to pick out the phone numbers or the email addresses in a load of web forms, or parse particular URLs from an API response. There's really so many ways that I think you might find Regex useful. And of course, in FME, if we can achieve our result with less transformers, then our process is going to be more efficient too. So, added bonus. Well, let's have a look at how we might validate that a text string is an email. So in FME, I might use some attribute splitter transformers to split at the @ sign and again at the dot, and then an attribute creator to expose and store those split values, and then I could use an attribute validator transformer to check that all the parts use numbers or letters, and that the last part is between 2 and 6 characters long. Well, here's the same thing with Regex. Yep, it uses just one transformer, so that's pretty powerful. And if we think about it, if we scale this up to like millions of records, then that's going to be a really efficient process too. So let's have a look at the transformers. The main transformers we use for Regex are the string searcher and its partner in crime, the string replacer. And they're pretty straightforward actually. You specify the data that you want to search and then the regex that you want to run against it. And then there's a handy little editor to help you with writing the regex too. But there are a bunch of other transformers which use regex too. So some, like the tester and the attribute validator, they've got an operator of contains regex. And then others, which use the text editor dialog, mean that you can use the regex functions directly. So there's a find regex and a replace regex function, and lots of the attribute management transformers have this capability now. And there are, of course, custom transformers that are using Regex, and these are freely available from the FME Hub. I'll just give one final shout out for the UK Postcode Validator down here. So that's using Regex to validate the syntax of postcode values. And well, that's where my love affair with Regex began, really, back when we were developing that. So now we know where to use it, let's have a look at Regex itself. So we've got some regex defined on the left and our text strings here that we're searching. And a regex engine walks through the regex token by token, attempting to match the next token in the regex to the next character in the string. And it's always returning the leftmost match. So once it finds its first match, it stops, it doesn't continue any further. And you can, of course, add more complex regex to find other instances, but that's for another day, really. So our second example here, we're using the caret symbol to search for FME at the start of the string. We've got the pipe symbol that identifies a choice, so both options are valid. So license with a C or license with an S are matched. Or we can use a character class. So these are the square brackets to achieve the same thing. So square brackets, character class, we can choose any one of the characters in that class. Or a final example, we can use the question mark to make the preceding character optional. So whether you spell colour in Canadian or correctly, then the regex matches both here. So here's a real world example. We've got some regex for an email. A key thing to look out for are the brackets. So round brackets are capture groups and they break the regex up. So we've got a series of characters followed by an @ symbol, followed by another series of characters, followed by a dot, and then followed by a bunch of letters. Oh, and the whole string here must be a whole word, so something like white space either side. So that kind of makes sense, right, for an email. Well, let's delve a little deeper. So we've got some square brackets also, and these are character classes. So we can match any of the characters specified, so letters or numbers or any of these characters. And then the plus sign tells us that there can be any number of them. And then again, we've got a slightly different combination of allowed characters in this character class, repeated any number of times. And then a dot, and the backslash is used here to escape the dot, so to treat it literally. And that's because the dot has a special meaning in regex. And again, more text, so letters only this time, and they're repeated 2 to 6 times. So again, more brackets, curly brackets this time, and they're used to denote quantifiers. And this is not a special listing, it's just some common basic regex characters. You can find them online really easily, just Google regex cheat sheet. But I find myself coming back to this list, again and again each time I pick it up. And in fact, there's nothing special about this regex for email either. In fact, it's probably not going to find all emails at all. And that's a key thing, really. How strict or complex you make your regex really depends on your data scenario. So for example, if you're looking at master maptoids from Ordnance Survey, you can be pretty sure they've been validated already, and your regex doesn't need to be very strong. But in another scenario, where maybe your data has been entered by customers or it's been scraped from the web, something that's sort of prone to error, then it's going to need a much stricter regex. So let's look at this example for a date field. So to start with, we might want to use this regex, which is two digits for the date, month and year, with any character for the divider. So that works well with, valid date strings, but it's also matching for strings that are not dates. And this is a really common problem. In particular, the dot token can be used and it's often misused, and it's really powerful, so you need to be just a bit careful when using it. Right, well, let's rethink how we might do this. So now we've specified that the divider can be a fixed set of characters, so any one of these characters. And that's pretty good, giving us what we want. So it's matching these date strings, but it's also matching this non-date string. And that's because days and months are actually limited in number. So let's have another go. Here we go. This looks a bit better. We're restricting the digits that we're allowing for days and for months. And that's working better, but as you can see it's still not quite perfect. So thinking this could take a while, right? So I'd suggest, we get some help from our friends. So do a Google search for useful or common regex and look at some of the results. I kind of like this one from Luke Haas, but there's really no need to build regex from scratch for, common patterns. It's not new. There's lots of resources online where, some very clever people have shared their regex, so just use it. And I guess what I hope to achieve from this session is to give you enough knowledge to be able to read and interpret the regex that you find online, so you can make an informed decision on, what works for your data or how you might need to tweak it. And there are lots of resources online. I've put a few I found really helpful, for a non-developer like me, on a slide at the end. But there are lots to choose from. And there are lots of regex tools also. So FME has its own regular expression editor, so you can test your regexes. But there are lots of online tools also. And one that I found particularly useful is this one, Regextester Com. It's got a nice simple interface, but it's got a few hidden gems too. So I guess importantly, it supports Perl compatible regular expressions, which is the flavour of regex that FME supports. So there are many flavours of regex, so you do get slight differences across programming environments, but also not all support the same expressions, and also they don't all behave in the same way for the same expression. So it's kind of good to know what you're working with. So let's go take a look at Regextester Com. So you can see it's got quite a nice simple interface. Here's my regex and it highlights the match down here for me. So you can choose your regex flavor. You can choose some options here, like whether to ignore case. But a really nice feature is the help that it gives you. So if you hover over the regex tokens, it will explain them to you, and similarly over the matching. So really nice feature. I find this really helpful when you're trying to decipher some regex that you've borrowed off the internet. So really nice feature. Okay, so I'm just going to finish with my top 3 regex examples, best of fair if you like. First up, it's my favourite regex tool, the Regextester that we've just had a look at. At number 2, it's back references, And these are a clever way to reuse capture groups. So the regex that we define within the round brackets, the capture group, we can use that later, call that later in the same expression, and that's really quite powerful. So you can see here we've used it to find duplicate words, but you could use something similar to, perhaps test polygon geometry strings are closed perhaps. And finally at number 3, it's the function caller transformer using some regex. And this was a question raised on the community actually, and answered by Takashi with some regex. So thank you Takashi for this. So if anyone has used the matcher transformer in Anger, you might be familiar with an issue whereby hidden or unexposed FME format attributes are assessed in the matcher. So you need to remove them for your match, but the bulk attribute remover doesn't seem to work in this particular scenario. What does work though is using a regex function within the remove attributes function. So really clever workaround, and thanks to Takashi for sharing that. So those are my top 3 takeaways for today. Hopefully, you've come away from this with a better understanding of what regex is and how it might help you. And these are just some further resources that I'd recommend. So lots to choose from, but this one in particular, Regex Buddy, absolutely fantastic set of tutorials if you want to sort of deep dive into the detail on it. So thank you for your time. I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, so thank you Mary very much for that one. Mike's just chimed in with a message that you've got back to him on it. It's about the Regex Editor in the interface in FME. You can do testing directly in there. Basically, the transformers that support regex, you can click in, and when you're creating your regex, you can pop open the little tester directly there and then in the interface. It's a little bit similar to rubular.com, which is another regex tester. The interface is quite similar to that, but actually I've just made a note of Regextester Mary, because that wasn't a website I've used before, so that's a useful one for sure.
Yeah, no, as I said, the best feature that I haven't seen on any other one is the ability to get it to explain to you exactly what each of the tokens are.
Those tooltips are super useful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's got lots of examples as well, so it can sort of be a one-stop starting point for.
Yeah. There was a question about the fuzzy string comparer. One of your slides had a green transformer on it, and someone's asked me why it's green.
Why it's green? Yeah. Okay. So transformers are green when they're custom transformers. So custom transformer is one that's sort of like a block of code. So it's actually a combination of a bunch of transformers that are lumped into I was going to say the word package, but package means something else. Yeah. So it's like a little package of transformers that you can then reuse very easily. So on the canvas it appears as the one green transformers, but in the background it could be a whole set of transformers, a mini workspace if you like, that you've got hooked up to it. And they're green, but you can also get cyan coloured, so slightly bluey tinged custom transformers also, and that's just to do with how they're configured. So the cyan ones means that they're linked, so they're stored externally in an external file, which is a .fmx file, and the green transformers, the custom transformer is an embedded one, so it's embedded within the workspace, within the .fmw file itself.
Okay. Fab, thank you. UK Postcode Validator cropped up there. I mean, we've talked about that
For
plenty of times before. That's obviously a custom transformer. I've got someone here, I think it prompted the question. I've got a postcode addressed. Okay, so someone's basically saying they've got postcodes in their data, but they've got multiple address fields, and the postcode is rarely always in the conveniently named postcode column. Sometimes it sits in other fields, like it could turn up in post town or county.
Right.
Can you use Regex to look for something that looks like a postcode and match it?
Yes, of course, that's exactly what you would use Regex for, is to look for that pattern. So I guess there's one way you could do that with that particular data set, so where it's not all sitting in the one field. So you could concatenate all of those address fields together, so a string concatenator or the attribute manager, and put them in an address attribute, a new field, and then pass that new field into the postcode validator, and that would do the job for you. Or you can just take the regex itself and use it within the string searcher transformer. It's just a standard regex that we can happily share with anyone if they're interested in that. They can just get in touch. So the postcode validator transformer behind the scenes is using a regex to search for postcode patterns, and then it's doing some extra value add, like giving you responses in English rather than in code, to try and make it a bit more user friendly.
Albeit the regex in there is about a yard long, but
yeah. But we've got Regextester now to hopefully explain it all.
Perfect.
Or hopefully we've got a quite complete help page in the custom transformer on that one.
Super. Okay, fab. Thank you, Mary, very much. I am going to skip through to bring us to a close, but thank you for that. Okay, so there we go. Hopefully that was a few sessions to stimulate a little bit of thought about how you can use FME, perhaps in a way that you haven't previously thought of. There's a few specific tips and tricks in there to help you improve your data juggling skills too. For now then, really all it leaves me to say is thank you for joining us. As I said at the beginning, we really appreciate you coming along live. It makes it far more interesting from a session perspective. I also wanted to briefly use this as an opportunity to promote the FME Certification program. Some of you may have noticed that every now and again today you might have seen that next to our names, Mary, Simon and I have got strategically positioned logos. Those are FME certification badges, and we display them with pride because we worked frankly quite darn hard to get them, and even harder actually to keep them. Simon achieved his FME Certified Server Professional accreditation last year, and Mary just last week got reaccredited for a further 3 years as a Certified FME Professional. Anyway, why am I bringing it up? Well, my reason for mentioning it really is because you too can become an FME Certified Professional if you've used FME for a little while and have been involved in some significant projects that you can submit as case studies to bolster your submission. Presenting at events like this is also a great way of raising your profile, and it also makes it easier to achieve your own certification when you come to apply, because you can use it as part of your submission. So if anyone's interested in taking part in something like this in the future, do please drop me a line, and who knows, it might be your name on the certification wall of fame before you know it. I also wanted to let you have a few resources to review after today. Firstly, all of our scheduled FME training is listed at onespatial.com /training, and any recordings or events and webinars that we do, along with the recording of today's event, are always going to end up on our on-demand, is on-demand page. Safe's community pages mustn't be missed too. Over there you'll find thousands of how-to articles, and importantly that's where the chat forum is. It's effectively the sort of stack exchange for FME. And lastly, if you have a generic inquiry, just send it to fme@onespatial.com and we'd love to help you out. If you know you're an existing customer on active FME support and maintenance, you get access to a special dedicated service, and this is the quickest way through to that. So that's support@onespatial.com. But if you're not sure about your status, just nudge Charlie on the chat now and she'll be able to give you an update. For those of you that don't know already, we've also got a full range of online public training courses that you can attend at a price per delegate. We also do private courses, and we use a variety of online platforms depending on the specific requirements. So as a special thank you for joining us live today, if you inquire about a training place this month on one of our courses, you can use the code 1SFMEWF10 to get yourself a 10% discount. There's a few T's and C's attached, but we can discuss those when you contact us. To find out more, you can either reach out direct to Charlie Doherty in the Zoom chat now, or her email is listed here, so you can drop her a note with your details, and she'll throw her email address into the chat window, so you can pick that up. The next scheduled desktop and server courses are later this month and early June, but we've got courses through to December against which that discount code is valid. And finally, this is really just a save the date point of interest. Many of you will have attended our annual conference before, either in person or online, but do please go and register your interest in our Smarter Data, Smarter World 2-day conference on November 10th and the 11th. And you can do that on onespatial.com/events. And that, as they say, is it. So thank you very much. And we'll hang online for a few more minutes to deal with any outstanding questions. But other than that, enjoy the rest of the FME World Fair, and we hope to see you again soon. So thank you very much.